Here we go, the debate the nation needs to have. Whether or not net zero by 2050 is a worthwhile goal or a pointless and damaging exercise, weakening our nation now and into the future. Two former National Party leaders, two former Deputy Prime Ministers no less, Barnaby Joyce and Michael McCormack, are making a parliamentary move with a private member's bill against net zero.
We've stuffed it up, I accept that. We've absolutely butchered it, and you've butchered it by going down the intermittent power process. You used to have the cheapest power in the world. With those evil coal-fired power stations, you just have really cheap, reliable power. Now you've got really unreliable, hellishly expensive power, and it's on the premise of you trying to achieve this ludicrous idea that Australia, in the minority of the globe, can somehow change droughts, change cyclones, reduce the extinction of species, because Australia's going to change the temperature of the weather.
So do you not worry about emissions at all?
It is insane.
I'm very much worried about the cost of power when we're getting left behind. I mean, we've got the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, wanting to do a productivity forum, and we're not talking about how we're going to have cheap energy. I mean, this is a crock. It is an absolute crock.
Remember, the Coalition made the move to formally support net zero back when Scott Morrison was Prime Minister and Barnaby was his deputy. This will be portrayed by much of the media and certainly by the government and other Green left politicians as the Coalition tearing themselves apart on climate policies, the climate wars breaking out all over again. And of course, that internal disagreement is a big factor in this debate. But with the Coalition at such a nadir at the moment, with Labor in the first days of its second term, what better time for the Coalition to get its house in order and try to make the best calls for the future of the nation? To discuss this issue, we've really got to separate the facts, the discussion of reality from the discussion of politics. These are two separate things. So let me start with the facts, and they all stack up against net zero. The first reason is the cost and the economic damage. We were once a cheap energy nation. It was one of our main economic advantages. And the push to reduce emissions has seen us switch to being a high-cost energy nation, which has cost thousands of jobs, increased the cost of living, and undercut our economic future. The push to net zero will cost at least $1 trillion. It'll push power prices even higher. It'll make electricity supplies less secure, alienate thousands upon thousands of hectares of land in the regions, and it will undercut all industries that rely heavily on electricity, which is just about everything. Now, the second reason that net zero makes no sense is that it cannot be done. No comparable economy has gotten anywhere close to net zero. None has made the switch to renewables that we're trying to make, and those that are trying are running into the same brick wall that we are. Look at Germany, look at Spain, look at California. Net zero is a pipe dream. Even when you look at the International Energy Agency, which favours net zero by 2050, its most optimistic outlook looks fanciful. To get there, it says renewable installations will have to triple by 2030. Think of the cost and practicality of doing that, tripling renewable energy in just 5 years. It just isn't happening. In 2021, it said half of all emissions reductions for net zero by 2050 will have to come from technologies not yet available on the market. Now it says the situation is better, and only 35% will have to come from new technologies. More than a third of the emissions reductions task from technology we don't have yet. So it's all about hope rather than actual plans. The IEA says the goal relies on new, smarter infrastructure, low emissions fuels, technology to capture carbon emissions from smokestacks and from the atmosphere, more nuclear power, and large land areas for renewables projects. Good luck. Just to highlight the scale of the challenge, check out this point. The IEA says the world will need 2 million kilometres of extra transmission lines built every year for the next 5 years. 2 million kilometres every year. Look, this stuff is nuts. It just won't happen. So our country is doing immense damage to itself to chase a goal it will never meet. Which brings me to the third reason that net zero is madness. Even if Australia could get to net zero, even if we spent all that money, found all that new technology, hurt our economy and got there, it wouldn't make one iota of difference to the climate. The only reason to do it, and it would have no impact. We already account for only 1% of global emissions. China emits more in a fortnight than we emit in a year. And emissions in China and India and Indonesia and a host of other nations are still rising. They're still building coal-fired power stations while we do this to ourselves. When you look at the graph of global emissions, you can see they're still heading up. They only dipped for a while when the world shut down for COVID, but they're heading upwards again. So why would we impose all this pain on ourselves, the pain we're already suffering, for no actual gain? It is actually madness. And both Joyce and McCormack are calling out the way that regional communities are paying the highest price.
When you've got people in my seat in Maxwell, Mangapla, The Rock, Quinty, Bowning, Bynalong, Crookwell, it's like I've been everywhere, man. They're all facing these shysters who come in, these spivs who come in and ride roughshod over farmers. They're signing up one neighbour and not the other, often their brother and sister. They're dividing families, they're ruining friendships that have been going not for years but for generations.
The head of the serpent on this is net zero. It's trying to attain this crazy idea that Australia by itself, because remember, China's not doing this.
I get that, Barnaby,
India's
but
not
what's
doing it.
the practical outcome of it? What's the energy mix, though? What's the ideal energy mix? If you get rid of net zero, then what does our energy system look like?
So what's the point of us doing this if the rest of the majority of the world, majority of the economies of the world are not doing it?
But isn't that an important question to answer, though? When you sit here and say get rid of net zero, I don't care about some arbitrary target. I want to know what you think our energy mix should look like.
Yeah, we should have more baseload power. Yes, you should have more coal-fired power stations. You should contend with nuclear. You already have intermittence. You have, as Bowen himself says, you've got about 42% intermittence.
Yep. Net zero by 2050 is an horrendously expensive and impractical burden we are imposing on ourselves that will not actually be achieved and would do absolutely nothing for the planet, the environment or the climate if it was achieved. So the right of centre parties should oppose it. They never should have supported it. They're supposed to be in favour of rational policies, pragmatic decisions, not virtue signalling and ideological frolics. So if they're true to their core values, they would opt out of net zero. But that's the reality. That's the logic. On top of all of that, there's the politics, and that can be tricky. For Susan Lee, the first question time as opposition leader today, this ensured that she had a baptism of fire. She wanted to turn the heat on Labor over its planned superannuation tax.
Prime Minister, it takes a lot to unite Paul Keating and John Howard, but both are totally against this unfair tax. Will the Prime Minister abandon his plans to work with the Greens and instead join me, the crossbench, Paul Keating and John Howard, to reject this unfair tax?
Yeah, well, of course, Labor's going on with that. But, of course, Labor couldn't wait to zero in on the climate wars.
I've been given a copy of the Coalition's anti-net zero bill. I'm not sure if the Leader of the Opposition's seen one, but I have. It came into my possession. It's going to be moved by the member for New England. We saw the member for New England, the new dream team, the dream couple, the member for New England, the member for Riverina are out there this morning backing each other in.
Fair enough. The politics are all a bit untidy. The Liberals are reviewing all their policies. The Nationals are looking specifically at energy. So they could both oppose net zero or both support it, or the coalition parties could go different ways. Until they decide, the debate's going to be messy.
Over and over again now, the electorate has told us that they want to see a net zero energy future. They want to see emissions come down. That's what successive elections have told us. Now, my personal opinion is that this is profoundly important.
Well, that's not actually true. The coalition has only taken net zero to an election twice, and they lost both times under Scott Morrison in 2022 and Peter Dutton this year. When the coalition won in 2013, 2016 and 2019, they did not back net zero, and they had climate policies far less extreme than Labor's. Still, if you want to see a disconnect from reality, have a listen to some more from Labor's Climate and Energy Minister.
What they're really doing is betraying people in rural and regional Australia, because people in rural and regional Australia are people who pay the price of drought and floods, Mr Speaker, which will be more common and more severe under climate change. It's people in rural and regional Australia who have the most to gain out of the jobs and investment created by net zero, Mr Speaker. That's what the Albanese government gets. That's what those who betray rural and regional Australia do not understand.
Really? This is a grown adult, a government minister, a sentient being apparently, who is pretending that building wind farms in Australia will change the climate. He reckons his wind turbines and solar panels and EVs will reduce the severity of droughts and floods in this land, which happens to be a land of droughts and flooding rains. It is idiotic, it is scientifically absurd, but it's what we have in government, it's what the people have voted for, and we have to wear the consequences. My advice to the coalition is very direct. Choose the policy that is rational. Forget the politicking and trying to work out which demographic backs this sort of Bowen fantasy and which doesn't. Just work through the logic and support the policy that will deliver the best results for Australia. It doesn't mean you don't want to be cautious and reduce our emissions. You can do that sensibly with nuclear energy or with reforestation and with some renewables. But if you back the logical plan, the politics will look after themselves, because the facts and the events that ensue, well, as they unfold, they will bolster all of your arguments. Right of centre policies, the coalition must go with facts and logic and leave the virtue signalling and the ideological crusades to the Green left. First, because that's their duty, that's why people vote for them. But second, because that will also take them on the path to success.